Good evening. My name is Brian Leib. I'm the Executive Director of the Iranian Americans for Liberty, and I'm currently sitting in IAL studios right here in Washington, D.C. On behalf of our Board of Directors, our supporters all around the nation, and the Iranian people instead of Iran, please allow me to welcome all of you to this evening's virtual Congressional Meet and Greet here in 2022. Now, last year in 2021, we proudly hosted 16 members of Congress for these virtual Congressional Meet and Greets with members such as Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, Congressman Byron Donalds, Congressman Chip Roy, Congresswoman Yvette Herrell, and many more. This evening, we're honored to host Congresswoman Mary Miller from the 15th Congressional District of Illinois. But before we get started, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about our organization. The Iranian Americans for Liberty are a bipartisan group of Iranian Americans from all around the nation that are working together to support and strengthen U.S. foreign policy and national security solutions that bring democracy, human rights accountability, and freedom of speech to Iranians living under the oppressive Islamic Republic of Iran. So that's a little bit more about IAL. Now let's tell you a little bit more about our esteemed guest that's sitting across the table from me. Congresswoman Mary Miller represents the 15th Congressional District of Illinois in the United States House of Representatives, where she serves on the Agriculture Committee and Education and Labor Committee. Mary is a proud member of the House Freedom Caucus, the Republican Study Committee, where she fights for conservative constitutional principles, including the right to life, the Second Amendment, and election integrity. Congresswoman Miller is a wife, a mother, a grandmother, and a local farmer who serves as a voice for her families and of the farmers that are ignored back in her district by DC insiders. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how many grandchildren she has, because it's a record, I think, ladies and gentlemen. But at this time, it's my pleasure to kick the program off by introducing tonight's guest, Congresswoman Miller. Thank you very much for being here. I'd like to turn it over to you just for some quick opening remarks, and then we'll jump into Q&A.
Well, it's great to be here and to be a part of the group that's fighting for our country. I have friends around the world, and they said if our country goes down, the whole world goes with them. So we've been a beacon of light in light of freedom and then economic opportunity. And I'm very sad that we've gone from America first to America last in breakneck speed. And, you know, the people back home are very, I would say, kind of scared at what's been happening to our country this past year. So.
Yeah, I think we all can agree with that. Mm-hmm. I mean, you mentioned America last versus America first, and we're going to talk about that in one of our questions here, but that's well said. So, Congresswoman, it's great for you to be here. Looking forward to this evening's conversation. We're going to jump right into the Q&A here. So for the first question, I always think it's good to tell our audience a little bit more about, you know, what a member of Congress does, right? And for you, you know, you sit on these two committees that I mentioned. Maybe you could tell our audience a little bit more about, you know, how you use these committee assignments to really advocate on behalf of your constituents.
Sure. So first of all, I'm probably the most regular person that ever showed up at Congress. My husband and I are farmers, and I've raised 7 children. I've been involved in education. So my first and second committee choice assignments, which I got, was agriculture and then education and labor. And I believe because of my expertise and experience in agriculture that I'm able to bring a lot to the table there. Also, the Ag Committee does deal with a lot of issues that impact my district and rural Americans. And then education and labor, of course, children are my passion. I just told you I believe children are the hope of our nation, and I want all children to have access to quality education. And the other thing is I want parents to feel empowered to make the best decisions for their children.
Well said. Well said indeed. So let's talk a little bit about your affiliation with the House Freedom Caucus. You know, we have had the pleasure of hosting many House Freedom Caucus members, such as Congressman Donalds, Congressman Chip Roy, and also the former chairman, Congressman Andy Biggs from Arizona. So tell our audience a little bit more. I know what the House Freedom Caucus is, but they might not. So tell us a little bit more about the Freedom Caucus and why you decided to align with that group.
Well, I believed in order to be a good legislator, it's good to have plumb lines. And, the plumb line that the House Freedom Caucus members use is the Constitution. So I go back home. A lot of people have heard of the Freedom Caucus, by the way, and I tell them that they're the constitutional patriots. So they are the ones that are fighting for faith, family, freedom, rule of law, and the Constitution. And I do believe we're going to take back the House in the next election, but that's not enough. We need to really have bold fighters, and that's what I see in the Freedom Caucus. So for me, it's been great to have a team to belong to, and I feel like it's helping me and will continue to help me to be a more effective member.
I agree, and I think under the leadership of the new chairman, Congressman Scott Perry from my home state of Pennsylvania, I think the future is very bright for you and for your caucus members. So we talked a little bit in the opening, you mentioned, I should say, about America first versus America last. So, you consider yourself to be America first. I consider myself to be America first. Millions of Americans consider themselves to be America first. But what does America first mean to you?
Well, first of all, it's kind of sad that we actually had to have a president come forward and have a whole agenda called America First, because shouldn't our leaders have always been for America First? But no, we've elected people in leadership who promise to do something for us, and they show up here and they actually do something to us. So finally, President Trump, I call him our most courageous president. He comes in and he deals with things, problems and issues that have been kicked down the road, kicking the can down the road, like our border. He secures our border. He gets us energy independence. He deals with North Korea, which had been rumbling for a long time. He empowered our economy by lowering taxes and deregulating, and he brought back patriotism, and also religious freedom. The most pro-life president we've ever had. School choice. I mean, these were problems that we've had that nobody ever really, the solutions were in a way simple, but he was decisive and was able to implement and put these things into practice and really turn the country around.
You just rattled off a whole host of different things that the President Trump did. And I'll say with confidence, I think you would agree with me that there has not been a president in either of our lifetimes that has made so many campaign promises and delivered on all those campaign promises.
Yes.
It's a breath of fresh air when it comes to politicians, for sure. But thank you for talking about that a little bit. So, listen, I'm proud to call you a friend and be sitting here. I'm sure your constituents back home are very proud of the work you're doing on domestic issues and fighting for your constituents. So now we talked about some domestic things. We're going to switch over, talk a little bit about some foreign policy. So a couple weekends ago, over, I think, 12 ballistic missiles were fired from inside of Iran by the IRGC into Iraq, and actually in very close proximity to one of our consulates, American consulates. Now, the IRGC proudly claimed responsibility for this attack, and as I just mentioned, it was very close to one of our consulates. So do you think the IRGC was sending a message to Joe Biden with this attack? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, definitely. I mean, Joe Biden's failed policies and his weakness has created chaos in the world, basically destabilizing the whole world and emboldened our enemies, Russia, China, and Iran. And, Americans really want, like, the America First. Another thing that I didn't mention is the peace through strength that we had through him, and I'm afraid we're going to get war from weakness through Biden's policies.
Well, I think that's very well said. I mean, we already are having that. I mean, we saw what peace through strength did, and I'm of the belief, I think you might share this belief, that Russia probably would not be invading Ukraine right now. China would not be flexing on Taiwan. Iran wouldn't be flexing on the world if our current president, would project some strength onto the world.
Right. Well, it's kind of like on a human level, if you're hungry and you're begging, you're not strong. And the fact that he dismantled our energy and made us dependent on foreign oil and gas, he has to hate our country. You and I were talking about it. There is no way these people are uninformed or stupid. This is deliberate. And anyway, elections have consequences, and I can't wait to have some relief.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the world is watching as well. Our adversaries that you just rattled off from Iran to Russia to China. When it comes to taking advantage of American weakness. They're very, very good at that. So let's switch to our next question, staying on topic of this current administration and their diplomatic efforts, we'll call them, with the Iranian regime. So as you probably know, world leaders were in Vienna for 6 or 7 weeks last summer, having discussions related to the JCPOA. They returned again this year. They're still having discussions in Vienna. I don't know, we're on the 10th or 11th or 15th round at this point. I've lost track, to be candid with you. There's still no deal. They're still further apart than ever before. And the U.S. Special Envoy to Iran is a gentleman by the name of Robert Malley. He was there in Obama's White House. He was one of the first hires that President Biden made. Now, he's promised the Iranian regime that he's going to lift all economic sanctions if they come back to the negotiating table. And the Iranian regime, with their new leader, has stated that they're not going to entertain having any conversations with us unless we remove all the economic sanctions and re-enter the JCPOA with no conditions placed on this regime, right? So, sorry, long-winded question here. But there's other groups out there, not ours, but there's a group called the National Iranian American Council, who believe that U.S. government should just get back into the JCPOA, no questions asked, engage in diplomacy with the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. Again, we've taken the opposite position. So, sorry for the long question, but the question is this: should we rejoin the JCPOA, or should we maybe change our tune a little bit with how we're dealing with the Islamic Republic of Iran?
Well, they're terrorists. Why would we trust them? I support maximum sanctions. I signed on to Republican Study Committee Chairman Jim Banks' bill, max pressure, and I think the thought of lifting any sanctions is ridiculous. And it's about like whistling to open the border and everybody come in. Their policies are going to allow known terrorists, Iranian national terrorists, people that have been associated with terrorism, to be able to come to our country and stay here, and then allow them to get money, to get the nuclear arsenal that they're wanting. And, I've been quoting this, well, there's in the scriptures, they talk about a tree is known by its fruit, and politicians are known by their votes and the policies that they promote. And I can't say anything except Joe Biden and the left hates our country. They hate our way of life. I'm thinking if we can't stop them, this is not going to end well for us.
Well, yeah, I think there's a lot for us to be concerned about here domestically, for sure, and there's even more so to be concerned about, when you look at what's happening around the world. And I mean, before I talk about the next question, just a side note to all of that is I think you have this new axis of power, right? That's been formed. Okay, you have China, Russia, Iran, and they're all linked together. I mean, they're all directly linked together. And then you have North Korea, you have Venezuela, you have all the terrorist proxies that the Iranian regime funds. Congresswoman, when you put all of these groups together, they have more nukes than we have, they have more soldiers than we have, they have more resources than we have. And that's happened on Joe Biden's watch. Yes. That's happened on his watch. And again, back to the earlier point about peace through strength. Peace through strength is working. It's always going to work when you're dealing with terrorists. And thank you for calling the regime in Iran terrorists, because that's what they are. Right. That's what they've been since they took power in 1979. And not just terrorizing Americans, but terrorizing their own people.
They have blood on their hands, their own people, and American blood. And even there are Democrats that don't go along right now with what Joe Biden's wanting to do. And I believe the Senate Armed Forces head is concerned, has concerns over this, and he should. I mean, all Americans should be concerned.
Well, they should be. I mean, diplomacy with terrorists is never going to produce a result that benefits any of your constituents. It's not going to support me. But for some reason, the commander-in-chief tends to think that is going to help in some capacity.
Well, maybe we'll get some more information from Biden's Hunter's laptop.
Oh, there might be some information there.
Maybe it's not just China and Ukraine. I don't know.
Well, as Joe Biden told everyone when he was on the world stage just the other week, he's been doing foreign policy longer than anyone else has been around. My opinion, that's the problem.
Right. Well, even Obama's policies with Iran, I never could get over it. It just seems so reckless and anti-American, and like you say, for the whole world. Why would you prop up a terrorist regime?
Yeah, and on that note, I mean, it's widely known that the Islamic Republic funds terrorism all around the world. They're the leading fiscal sponsor, logistical sponsor of terrorism. Recent years, this regime in Tehran has provided support to Hamas and Palestinian Jihad inside of Israel, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthi rebels in Yemen. And over the last couple of months, there were, or I should say the last couple of years, there's been Iranians protesting inside of Iran for this very reason. You know, the Iranian people are sick and tired of their government taking the resources that they have and funding terrorism instead of doing things to actually help them. So, I mean, we saw this firsthand in 2021, the latest round of protests. It's kind of the same thing keeps happening. Iranian people take to the streets. The Iranian regime turns off the internet so they can't get their message out there. Next thing you know, sadly, there's blood on the streets of Iran. So question is this. Do you stand with the Iranian people who have continually risen up against this regime? And do you think that President Biden should maybe stop emboldening these mullahs in Tehran? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I feel for the people there. And even when President Trump was first elected, just the ISIS terror that was going on and spreading, it just seemed like they were on fire over there. And my heart just went out to those people, and I hope that something like that doesn't come up again. But I appreciated how President Trump stopped that Islamic territorial caliphate, took out several of their leaders strategically without getting us, completely involved in another war. I appreciated that too. But peace through strength, that's what we need. There's always going to be evil in the world, and it will never stop unless good people push back on it.
And another one of those terrorists, and you can probably recall this, that President Trump executed was Qasem Soleimani, who was the IRGC's #1 guy. What's interesting about that is the left in America, the Representative Ilhan Omars of the world and Rashida Tlaib's, everyone, they said, oh my God, President Trump, what a reckless decision. World War III is going to happen. Guess what? We're sitting here and World War III might be happening, but it had nothing to do with Qasem Soleimani. So again, peace through strength does work. And when America flexes our muscles onto the world, they listen. So Congresswoman, earlier in the conversation, we talked about the IRGC and their acts of aggression. Now, we've recently learned, all of us have learned, that one of the new preconditions that the Iranian regime has told the Biden team is that, in terms to get back into the nuclear deal, is that the State Department must drop that FTO designation from the IRGC. The IRGC has been either directly or indirectly engaging in terrorism against America for 40 years now. They're a terrorist organization. That's what they are. And to your point, even Democrats have been coming out and saying that in recent days. So should we no longer label the IRGC as a terrorist organization? I mean, I don't think we should. I mean, what do you think?
It's ridiculous that we're going to let them tell us what we're going to do. They are terrorists, and we need to push back against them and be strong about it. I can't. I mean, to take them off the terror list or, give them concessions is hard to believe. I support the strongest sanctions.
Yeah, and something that's interesting about the IRGC in terms of what's happening right now, the very fact that the negotiators on the Iranian side would ask that shows me, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and say this, it shows me they're not actually serious about doing a deal with us, okay? They know we're not going to lift that. We can't lift that. It's just not going to happen. So the fact that they would ask for something like that, I think tells me, and I hope it should tell more people, that they're not serious about doing a deal with us. We don't have any leverage. America does not have any leverage when it comes to the regime anymore. Okay.
They are serious about getting their nukes, though.
Of course, that's why they keep enriching uranium at historic levels, and that's why they have partnerships with China and Russia now, who, oh, by the way, can help them with ballistic missiles. Nothing to be concerned about, though. Let's engage in diplomacy with that country.
Well, when they talk about, every day we're supposed to be concerned about global warming, I said, well, just wait till things heat up. when the nukes start flying. So
Let's hope that day never
let's
comes.
maybe focus on stopping that.
Well, let's hope that day never comes. Okay, so we've talked about domestic policy, foreign policy, no more politics, okay? The last question has nothing to do with politics. It might, depending on how you answer. But I'm curious. I mean, we ask this of all the members that we speak with, and we ask in an effort to kind of show the audience a different, a human side of you. A lot of people don't realize, I know them, but you're a human being, right? So the question is this. If you could have dinner with any two individuals, alive or dead, one, who would it be? And two, where would it be? And before you answer, so think about that for a second, I'm going to go first.
Okay.
This is something new. I've never done this before, okay? I think I would have dinner with my grandmother, who passed away 7 years ago. She was my absolute world. And I think I'd invite President Trump. And I think I'd invite President Trump, not because I need to see him again, but I think my grandmother might get a kick out of that. And where would I have the dinner? I would say Villa di Roma, which is the second oldest Italian restaurant in America, and that's in Philadelphia. So, so that's where I would have it. I think my grandmother would love it. What about you? Who are your two people and where?
That you love your grandma, since I have all these grandkids. I
the best.
like to know that the grandchildren appreciate grandma. Number one would be Phyllis Schlafly. I always wanted to meet her because she advocated and fought for the family. And the family is foundational to our culture. And the second person would be my mother. My mom has had some health problems, and I would love to have both of them be my guest at our farm. So my family and I still enjoy a meal together on Sundays. We call it family dinners. And we have not just the whole extended family, like 30 people, but we usually have other guests too. And I like to tell people, Americans get so obsessed over being jealous of each other with money and possessions and that. But after your basic needs are met, the thing that makes life so rich is your relationships. And I would like to encourage Americans to just look around and try to build relationships with people. But I love Phyllis Schlafly and my mom both because they built up the family.
So I want to ask about this dinner that you have every Sunday.
Yeah.
Is it the same? Is the menu the same every time? Or does it change?
It's pretty similar. We raise beef, so we bring out the beef.
Yeah, okay.
And you're welcome to come. We could put a slab of beef on the grill for you.
It sounds good. Coming to Illinois.
And then before, I don't have time anymore, but our kids do gardening, and they'll bring things that they raise. Our grandchildren raise free-range chickens, so sometimes we put chickens on a smoker.
So this is like a big meal every Sunday. It's a production.
No, it is big.
All right, I'm coming.
It's a feast.
I'm coming. So, Congresswoman, thank you for all of your answers on this. We've reached our time limit, and I know your time is valuable, and likewise. But on behalf of my organization, the Iranian Americans for Liberty, really want to say thank you for making this time to connect. And I also want to give you, the opportunity to give some closing remarks, potentially to the Iranian American community, to Iranians that are going to hear this message. What are your thoughts? What's your message?
Before you said that, I was going to add at the end that I would pray for the Iranian people and then also pray for our leadership. But, we need each other, and I can't imagine what it's like to live there and to have it be so destabilized. And of course, we're heading into that here in our own country if we let this continue. But just really not to be isolated, but to find people that you can be in relationship with to support you in the midst of whatever might come.
Well, Congresswoman Miller, thank you again for making the time to connect with me, with our organization, with the community that's tuning in. Before we wrap up, I'd like to tell our audience about our next event on May 11th at 12 p.m. We're going to be hosting Congresswoman Claudia Tenney from New York. We hope you can join that conversation. Make sure you're subscribed to our YouTube channel so you get notified every time we go live. But until next time, remember, lead with liberty at every turn. Have a good evening. May God bless America, and may God bless the liberty-seeking Iranian people. Have a great evening. Thank you so much. And thank you.